OpenAI just introduced a new type of AI system that can actually complete tasks for you, not just answer questions. It can open apps, analyze information, write emails, and execute workflows from start to finish. At the same time, other AI systems are beginning to coordinate multiple tools on their own without constant human input. Companies are now testing AI that can manage entire processes instead of just assisting with them. And this is where things start to get a little concerning. Because this isn't just another upgrade. This is a shift. Let's start with what this new system is actually doing, because at first, it doesn't seem that different. On the surface, it still looks like the same AI people are used to. You type something in, and it responds. But the difference is what happens after that response. Instead of stopping at an answer, this system continues. It takes the request, breaks it down into steps, and then begins executing those steps across different tools. That means if you ask it to organize information, it doesn't just give you suggestions. It actually processes the data, structures it, and prepares it for use. If you ask it to draft an email, it doesn't just generate text. It can adapt the tone, refine it, and even prepare it to be sent. And if you connect it to other tools, it can go even further. Opening documents, analyzing files, pulling information from different sources, and combining everything into one workflow. This is where the idea of AutoPilot starts to make sense. Because instead of manually handling every step, you're giving the system a direction and letting it carry out the process. And that's very different from how AI has been used up to now. For most people, AI has been something you interact with step by step. You ask something, it answers. You ask again, it answers again. Everything is guided. Everything is controlled. But now that's starting to change. These systems are being designed to take a goal and figure out how to reach it. They don't just respond. They plan, they execute, they adjust, and then they complete the task. And that's where the real shift begins. Because once AI can complete tasks, the role of the human changes. At first, it feels like a productivity boost. You get more done in less time. Simple tasks disappear. Work becomes faster. But over time, something else happens. The system gets better. It requires less input. It handles more complexity. And eventually, it starts replacing entire parts of a workflow. And that's when the question changes. It's no longer, how can this help me? It becomes, how much of this can it do without me? And that's where things start to feel different. Now, this idea of AI handling tasks isn't completely new, but what's new is how far it's going. Because earlier systems still relied heavily on human input. They needed constant direction. They would stop if something changed. They would fail if the context shifted. But now, these newer systems are being designed to handle those changes. They can adapt. They can adjust their approach. They can continue even when conditions are not perfect. And that's a big step forward. Because real work is not static. It changes constantly. New information appears. Requirements shift. Unexpected problems come up. And systems that can handle that become much more useful. That's why companies are investing heavily in this direction. Because once AI can handle dynamic workflows, it stops being just a tool. It becomes part of the system itself. And that's exactly what we're starting to see. Now, while this is happening with systems like AutoPilot, there's another layer to this that makes it even more powerful. Multi-tool coordination. Because one of the biggest limitations of AI in the past was that it operated in isolation. It could generate text. It could analyze data. It could perform specific tasks. But it didn't connect everything together. Now that's changing. These systems are being designed to interact with multiple tools at once. They can move between applications, pull data from different sources, and combine everything into one continuous process. So instead of switching between tools manually, the system handles that for you. And that might sound simple, but it changes everything. Because most modern work is not just one task, it's a chain of tasks. Research, analysis, communication, execution. And if one system can handle that chain, It reduces the need for multiple steps, which reduces time and increases efficiency. But again, that leads back to the same question. If one system can do the work of multiple steps, how many people are needed to manage those steps? And that's where the conversation shifts from productivity to impact. Because efficiency doesn't just improve workflows, it changes how resources are used. Now from there, let's expand this further. Because it's not just about one system, it's about where this is heading. And right now, the direction is very clear, toward autonomous AI. Systems that can operate with minimal supervision. Systems that can take goals and execute them over time. Systems that don't just react, but act. And that's where things start to connect with everything else happening in AI right now. Because at the same time, companies are developing models that can reason better, understand context better, and maintain long-term memory, which means these systems are not just executing tasks blindly. They are doing it with increasing awareness of context, and that makes them more reliable, more adaptable, and more capable. But it also raises the stakes, because the more capable these systems become, the more they can take on. And the more they take on, the more the role of the human changes. Now this doesn't mean everything disappears overnight, but it does mean that certain types of work become easier to automate. Repetitive tasks, structured workflows, data-heavy processes, things that follow clear patterns. Those are the first to change. And once those change, everything else starts to follow. Because once companies see the benefits, they expand the use. More tasks, more workflows, more systems. And that's how adoption grows. Not slowly, but in phases. Now, one of the most important parts of this shift is something that doesn't get talked about as much. Trust. Because for a system like this to be widely adopted, it needs to be reliable. People need to trust that it will complete tasks correctly, that it won't make critical mistakes, that it can handle unexpected situations. And that's why a lot of this development is happening behind the scenes. Testing, refining, improving, before it becomes widely available. But once that trust is established, things move quickly. Because at that point, the system is no longer experimental. It becomes practical, and practical tools get used. Now from there, let's connect this to the bigger picture. Because AutoPilot is not just one system. It represents a direction. A shift from AI as a tool, to AI as a system, to AI as something that can actually perform work. And once that shift happens, everything built around that work starts to change. Jobs, companies, industries. Because work is one of the core structures of how everything operates. And when that structure changes, the effects spread. Now this doesn't mean everything disappears, but it does mean that the way work is done evolves. Some roles become more efficient, some become less necessary, some change completely, and new roles begin to appear. But transitions like this are rarely simple, because technology moves fast, and adaptation takes time, and that gap creates uncertainty. Because people start asking, what does this mean for me? And that's a valid question. Because when systems can handle tasks that used to require humans, the impact becomes personal, not just theoretical. And that's why this moment feels different. Because for the first time, AI is not just assisting with work. It's starting to do the work. And once that line is crossed, the conversation changes. It's no longer about what AI might be able to do. It's about what it is already beginning to do, and how quickly that will expand. Because the trajectory is clear. More capability, more autonomy, more integration. And that leads to one final question. Not whether this will happen, but how fast it will happen, and how prepared people will be when it does.